They showed up with a moving truck to my house, without warning. I was 34 when I bought my first home, a modest two-bedroom townhouse nestled in the edge of a leafy Chicago neighborhood. Nothing extravagant, just brick siding, a small front garden I could finally plant tulips in, and a space that was entirely mine. The moment I crossed that threshold with the keys clutched tight in my hand, something inside me clicked. It wasn't just real estate, it was proof. Proof that I had built something from scratch, that I mattered, that I wasn't the invisible afterthought I'd always been made to feel like. My name is Julia Morgan, and for most of my life, I was the background character in someone else's family story. Growing up, Belinda, my younger sister by 4 years, was the golden child. She could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. When she brought home a crayon drawing, it was a masterpiece. When I aced a science fair, it was, "That's nice, Julia. Have you seen what Belinda made?" I learned early not to expect praise or even acknowledgement. I wasn't the pretty one, the charming one, the one they introduced at church like a prize trophy. I was the steady one, the one they forgot to include in vacation photos. The one who stayed out of trouble because there wasn't space for her to fall apart. That invisibility followed me well into adulthood. Even when I landed a solid job as a communications manager, nobody asked me how work was going. When Belinda flunked out of 2 colleges before deciding she was spiritually allergic to structure, our parents paid for her to find herself in Europe. Meanwhile, I was rationing frozen meals and scrimping on public transit fares to max out my savings for a down payment. Not once did they ask me why I was working overtime or skipping social events. I was expected to manage alone, and I did. I still remember walking into that open house on a gray February afternoon. I'd seen dozens of listings that month, none of them right. But this one had lights streaming through the big living room windows and crown molding that whispered charm without screaming for attention. It didn't beg to be adored. It simply existed, warm and solid. Just like me. When I told the realtor I wanted it, she smiled politely and said, "It's competitive out there." But I'd already decided. I didn't care how many offers they had. I was ready to fight for it. Signing those papers felt like reclaiming my own name. The house wasn't huge or trendy, but every detail, the brushed nickel handles, the slightly creaky stair, was mine. I picked out the paint colors myself, set up the furniture exactly the way I liked, hung my first art print over the mantel and stood back, arms crossed, feeling something close to pride. For once, there wasn't a single voice around to undercut the moment. No one sighing over how Belinda would have chosen a warmer tone or scoffing at my IKEA bookshelf. It was quiet, and it was mine. Of course, my parents didn't celebrate. When I called to tell them I'd bought a home, my mother's response was, "That's nice. Did Belinda tell you she's planning to move to LA to start a crystal healing business?" My father muttered something about property taxes. Belinda sent a text with 3 clapping emojis. That was it. No visit. No flowers. Not even a housewarming card. But by then, I wasn't surprised. Disappointed, sure, but not surprised. I didn't buy the house for them. I bought it for every version of me that felt unseen. Child Julia staring out the car window while Belinda got to pick the radio station. Teenage Julia sitting alone in the school pickup line because her parents were late again. Adult Julia clocking in early and leaving late because she had no one else to lean on. This house was for her. For all of us. The first night I spent there, I didn't unpack everything. I just pulled a throw blanket over myself on the couch, watched the street lamp flicker through the blinds, and let the silence wrap around me like a promise. For once, I didn't feel like I had to shrink myself to fit someone else's expectations. I didn't have to prove anything or wait for applause that would never come. I was finally home, not just in a house, but in my own life. And that felt more powerful than anything they ever withheld from me. It was a Thursday evening when I got the text from my mom, short and suspiciously casual. "Dinner at our place this Saturday. Belinda will be there. 6 p.m. That was it. No details, no asking if I had plans, no mention of what the occasion was. Just an order dressed as an invitation. I stared at my phone for a minute, thumb hovering over the screen, before finally replying, "Sure." I don't know why I still said yes. Maybe some deep-rooted programming, a pathetic sense of obligation, or maybe I just didn't want to give them another reason to pretend I didn't exist. By Saturday, I had already rehearsed how I'd slip the news in, how I'd casually bring up the promotion at work, the jump in salary, the new office with real windows and a door that closed. I'd imagine Mom giving a tight nod of approval, maybe even a polite, "Well, that's something," and Dad muttering his usual "Nice work, kiddo." I wasn't expecting a parade, just acknowledgement. When I pulled into the driveway, the lights were already on, and I could see silhouettes moving around the dining room. Belinda's car was out front, still decked out in those ridiculous crystal decals she thought made it spiritually aligned. I braced myself, took a breath, and knocked even though I still had a key. Mom answered the door with that forced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Oh, good. Julie is here." She called back into the house like I was the last ingredient in a recipe she hadn't wanted to make. I stepped inside, handed her the bottle of wine I brought, her favorite, though she never remembered that, and took my usual seat at the edge of the table, across from the hallway that led to the guest bathroom. My usual spot in the house, both physically and emotionally. Out of the way, close to the exit. Dinner started off bland enough. Roasted chicken, green beans, the same dry rolls Mom's been overbaking since the Clinton administration. Small talk about the weather, a bit of complaining from Dad about the price of gas. I waited for the lull, the inevitable awkward pause when everyone reached for their drinks or picked at their plates. That would be my opening. So, I started, keeping my tone light but firm. "I have some news. I got promoted. Communications director. Full team, corner office, better pay." I could barely get the words out before Belinda, smiling that infuriating, beatific smile of hers, tilted her head and said, "That's great, Jules," in a tone that made it sound like I'd said I bought new curtains. Then, without missing a beat, she added, "Actually, I have something to share too. I'm pregnant." Everything in the room stopped. Like someone had dropped a glass, and time froze mid-shatter. Dad's fork hit the plate with a clink. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest like she'd just been informed she was royalty. "Oh my God, Belinda, are you serious?" she cried, practically knocking over the gravy boat in her rush to get to her. Dad was already on his feet, rounding the table to hug her like he hadn't done a damn thing like that for me since I graduated college. "I'm going to be a grandfather," he kept saying, over and over, like the words themselves were some kind of miracle chant. "We're going to be grandparents, Pat. Can you believe it?" Mom was crying now, and Belinda was doing that fake humble thing she always did, the kind of practiced demure that belonged on a greeting card. "It was a surprise," she said, like the pregnancy just floated down from the heavens and blessed her womb without warning. But a happy one. The rest of the evening dissolved into a celebration. They toasted with the wine I brought, laughed about potential baby names, reminisced about Belinda's baby years like she was some kind of holy child who descended from the clouds. "Remember when she used to say applesauce, like Asselpaws?" Mom said, laughing so hard she snorted. "Oh, she was the cutest toddler." I sat there, silently sipping my wine, invisible again, like a ghost in the room. Nobody asked about my promotion. Nobody even circled back to it. My new role, my hard-earned title, my years of grinding with no backup and no handouts. They evaporated under the glow of Belinda's ultrasound announcement. At one point, I tried again. "I'll probably have to travel more with the new position," I said. Nothing. No reaction. Just more baby talk. Belinda held court like a queen, her hands resting protectively over the still flat plane of her stomach like it was already a throne. By the end of the night, they were making plans for baby showers and nursery themes. Mom was already talking about turning the guest room into a little haven for when Belinda visits with the baby. Dad was pulling out the dusty photo albums to compare baby pictures, none of which featured me beyond the occasional blurry background shot. I excused myself early, saying I had an early meeting. No one protested. Belinda gave me a breezy, "Take care, sis," like she hadn't just erased me from the evening with 2 words. When I got into my car and shut the door, the silence hit me like a punch. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring out at their house. The same house where I used to trace patterns on the foggy window panes and wonder what it would be like if someone noticed me first. It was almost funny in a gut-wrenching, twisted kind of way. I had built a life from the ground up. A home, a career, a sense of self. But all it took was Belinda doing what she always did. Taking up space she hadn't earned, for them to forget I existed. That night, I drove home with the radio off again. I walked into my house, and poured myself a glass of the wine I had actually wanted to drink. And as I curled up on my couch, the promotion letter still sitting on the side table unopened, I thought, not for the first time, that some people will never clap for you unless you're holding someone else's child. It was 3 days after that dinner, after my promotion was buried under a flood of pastel onesie fantasies and Pinterest nursery schemes, that my phone lit up with Dad's name. He never called. Not unless something was wrong or needed fixing. I stared at it for a second, then answered with that automatic, conditioned reflex you develop when you've been trained to be useful. "Hey, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. He didn't bother with small talk. "No, how are you?" Or "What's new?" Just dove right in with, "How many bedrooms do you have there?" I blinked. "Sorry, what?" "The house," he said, his tone overly casual in the way that made every alarm in my brain go off. "You said it's a 2-bedroom, right? You have the master and the other one's, what, a guest room?" Technically, yeah, I said slowly. It's a spare room. I use it as an office sometimes. Why? He gave a vague, dismissive grunt. Just curious. It's nice that you have that kind of space. Most people your age are still living in cramped apartments, you know. You've done well for yourself. The compliment landed with all the grace of a lead balloon. I could feel the hook dangling just below the surface of his words, barely veiled by the forced tone. Okay, I said, wary. Is there a reason we're taking a virtual tour of my floor plan right now? Another pause, a heavier sigh this time. Then he dropped it, the real reason. Your brother-in-law, Drew, well, he's had a bit of a setback. Company's doing layoffs. Whole department got canned last week. You know how the economy is. I didn't say anything. Just let the silence stretch. Because I knew what was coming next. The way Dad cleared his throat confirmed it. They're in a tight spot right now, he continued. Belinda's still not working. Focusing on the pregnancy and all. And with the baby coming, well, it's a lot. They're behind on a few things. Credit cards, the lease, it's been tough. I nodded slowly, even though he couldn't see me. That sucks, I said. I'm sorry to hear that. Another pause. Then, the kicker. Your mom and I were just saying how lucky you are to have that extra space. And how family's supposed to look out for each other. Especially in times like these. There it was. The ask, dressed up in guilt and obligation. They never came out and said things outright. Just let the implication settle in like fog and waited for me to choke on it. You're suggesting they move in with me, I said flatly, just to rip the Band-Aid off. Well, just temporarily, Dad said, like it was the most logical thing in the world. You've got the room. They need a place to land on their feet. Belinda could use the help. She's got so much on her plate right now, being pregnant and all. I closed my eyes, leaned back into the couch, pressing the phone tighter to my ear so I wouldn't say what I really wanted to say. That the last time I had a crisis, when I was drowning in student loans, living on instant noodles, working 12-hour shifts, and still falling behind on rent, no one offered me a spare room. No one suggested Belinda convert her meditation corner into a place for me to sleep. I was told to figure it out, because I was so independent. Dad, I said, keeping my voice even, I worked my ass off to buy this place. I made sacrifices. I don't even have a proper dining table yet because I'm still budgeting. And now you're telling me that because I've made things work, I'm the safety net for everyone else. He didn't answer that directly, just sighed again, deeper this time. Look, I'm not saying it has to be forever. Just a little support. A family stepping up for one another. Family stepping up. Right. Except only when it's convenient for them. Only when it doesn't cost them anything. Only when the responsible one is expected to pick up the pieces of everyone else's mess. I ended the call with a tight-lipped, let me think about it, knowing full well that thinking was the last thing they wanted. What they expected was compliance. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the closed door of that second bedroom, the one I had painted by myself on a rainy Saturday afternoon, the one with the neatly organized bookshelf, my backup monitor, the soft blue curtains I picked out after 5 separate trips to the store because I couldn't decide between textures. It wasn't just a room. It was mine, my effort, my peace. And now, once again, it was being sized up as real estate for someone else's drama. Someone who had never lifted a finger for me. Someone who couldn't even clap when I made director. And suddenly I saw it all so clearly. The way they'd move in, slowly take over. Belinda making offhand comments about my furniture, asking if I had decaf tea, leaving mugs in the sink. Drew offering to help out, and never following through. My weekends disappearing into babysitting, errand running, emotional labor. The house shrinking around me until I was a guest in the one place I had built to finally belong. They wanted to turn my home into a sanctuary for Belinda's mistakes, all while pretending like I should be grateful for the opportunity. And all I could think was, not this time. I should have known it wouldn't stop at a phone call. 2 days later, my mom invited herself over under the pretense of dropping off some old photo albums she thought I might want. She showed up with a Tupperware container of casserole and a rehearsed smile that didn't fool me for a second. The second she stepped inside, her eyes started scanning every inch of the house like she was taking inventory, counting chairs, measuring wall space, silently calculating where Belinda's crib could go. We made it about 4.5 minutes into awkward small talk before she sat down on my couch, smoothed her slacks like she was prepping for a board meeting, and said, "Have you thought about what your father and I suggested?" I didn't even bother pretending not to know what she meant. "You mean moving out of the house I spent years saving for so my sister can live here for free?" Her lips pursed, and she tilted her head like she was trying to see things from some imaginary benevolent perspective. "It's just a temporary solution, Julia. You know how hard things are for Belinda and Drew right now. They need stability, especially with the baby on the way. And you're in a good position. You're flexible. You don't have dependents." I stared at her, trying to process the sheer audacity of it. You want me to move into a tiny apartment, I said slowly, to make room in my own house for Belinda. You do realize how ridiculous that sounds, right? She bristled. It's not ridiculous. It's what families do. We adjust. We support each other. We make sacrifices. No. I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. What you mean is I make sacrifices. I give things up. I get shoved aside. Again. Her expression tightened, like I'd stepped over some invisible line. Don't make this about the past. This is about now. About what's best for everyone. I stood there, gripping the edge of the counter so tightly my knuckles ached. Everyone except me, apparently. She sighed. That long, tired sigh she always used when she wanted to make me feel like the problem. Julia, I didn't raise you to be selfish. That hit harder than I expected. I felt it like a slap, sharp and familiar. The way she said it, like it was obvious, like it was truth, made my stomach twist. I thought of every birthday that went unnoticed, every report card waved away because Belinda had a sniffle or a tantrum, every time I was told to be quiet so she could nap or rehearse or just express herself. I thought of how I'd built this life from scraps, with no blueprint, no help, and how now that it finally resembled something whole, they were circling like vultures pretending they were doing me a favor by picking it apart. I'm not moving out, I said, my voice flat, final. This house is mine. I worked for it. I earned it. And I'm not giving it up because Belinda and Drew can't manage their own finances. Her jaw tensed. You don't mean that. You're just upset. No, I said, taking a step back, suddenly so tired I felt it in my bones. I'm done pretending that this is normal. I'm not the fallback plan. Not anymore. She stood then, stiff and affronted, gathering her purse like I'd just insulted the Pope. You'll regret this, Julia. When the baby's here and you see what you've missed, you'll wish you'd been more generous. I didn't answer. Just opened the door and waited while she walked past me, silent and simmering. She didn't take the casserole. I left it on the counter for a few days before finally dumping it untouched into the trash. That night, I sat alone on my couch, the one she'd been evaluating like she was picking furniture for someone else. And all I could think was how quickly love turned conditional when it wasn't convenient for them. This house wasn't just mine by mortgage. It was mine because I was the only one who had ever fought for me. And I wasn't giving it up for anyone. It started subtly, like most invasions do, Belinda popping by just to say hi. Always with that faux casual tone and a box of overpriced herbal tea she claimed I had to try. She never called ahead, just rang the bell and let herself in with the spare key Mom must have passed along behind my back. At first, I didn't want to make it a thing. I figured if I kept things civil, she'd get the message. But Belinda never really understood messages unless they were delivered on a silver tray and wrapped in flattery. She'd wander around the house like she was on a guided tour, pointing at walls and talking to herself. Oh wow, this would be perfect for the bassinet, she murmured one day, staring at the corner of my living room like it already belonged to her. Another time, she walked into my office, my only quiet place, the one room in the house that still felt untouched by anyone else, and ran her hand along my desk. You know, she said, smiling that dreamy, detached smile she wore whenever she was about to say something outrageous. If you just got a smaller one, this room could totally be the nursery. The light's perfect in the mornings. It's got that peaceful energy. I told her to stop. Not joking, not laughing. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, Belinda, this is my house. You're not moving in. There is no nursery. Stop acting like there is. She blinked at me like I'd spoken in another language, then gave this half-hearted laugh and said, I'm just imagining, Julia. You don't have to be so intense. But it didn't stop. If anything, she doubled down. Came by 3 times in 1 week with various excuses. She'd been in the area, or she needed a break from all the stress. Or, once, she claimed she was craving the chocolate I keep in the freezer. She kept wandering into the guest room, running her fingers along the windowsill, opening the closet, asking if I had any spare bedding. She'd sit on the edge of the bed like she was already trying it out, press down on the mattress and say things like, this could work for now, right? Just until things settled down. I stopped answering the door, started pretending I wasn't home when her car pulled into the driveway. I blocked her number for a while. But even then, I'd find signs of her visit. Mug moved slightly on the counter, front mat brushed off center. One time, even a sticky note on my fridge that said, stopped by. Hope you're okay, love. She was acting like this was already hers. Like she was just easing into the space, waiting for me to step aside. Then one morning, a delivery truck pulled up while I was on a conference call. The guy rang the bell and asked for Julia Morgan. I signed without thinking, assuming it was office equipment. But when I opened the box in my foyer and saw the folded legs of a brand new crib, pale wood and expensive, I just stood there for a moment, staring at it like it might explode. The label was clear. Ordered by Belinda Morgan. Shipped to my address. I didn't even get mad at first. I just felt this cold, creeping sense of displacement, like my own home was slipping out from under me, like I was being erased in slow motion. I picked up my phone, unblocked her number, and called. She answered on the second ring, all breathy like she'd been waiting. "Oh hey, did it arrive? What the hell is wrong with you?" I asked. I didn't yell, didn't scream. I was too tired for that. But my voice was low and sharp and shaking, and she knew I meant every word. "Don't be dramatic," she said, laughing like it was all a big misunderstanding. "I just thought it would save time. You know, for when things settle." "There is nothing to settle," I said. "You don't live here. You're not moving in. This is my house. Not yours. Not Mom's. Not Dad's. And sure as hell not the baby's." There was a pause on the line, and then she said, "You really are selfish sometimes, Julia. I mean, I thought we were past this. I thought you'd grown up." I hung up. That night, I dragged the crib into the garage and covered it with a tarp. I didn't throw it out. Not because I cared about it, but because I knew if I left it out for trash, Mom would accuse me of being cruel, and Belinda would show up with tears and cameras and a performance ready for Facebook. I wasn't giving them the satisfaction, but I also wasn't giving them the room. They could keep dreaming. But this house, it wasn't their stage. I woke up to the sound of tires on gravel, a low, rumbling hum that didn't belong in my quiet neighborhood at 7:12 on a Saturday morning. I peeled back the curtain, still half asleep, expecting maybe a utility truck or a lost delivery van. Instead, I saw a U-Haul pulling into my driveway. And behind it, my parents' SUV. And behind that, Belinda's beat-up Prius. For a second, my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. I stood there, barefoot, the hem of my sweatshirt grazing my knees, watching as my father stepped out of the driver's seat like this was just a casual Saturday chore. My mother followed, already pulling a clipboard from her tote, like we were coordinating a corporate relocation. And then Belinda and Drew emerged, stretching and yawning like they were checking into a hotel. I ran downstairs without thinking, heart pounding in my chest. By the time I opened the front door, my dad was walking toward the house with a roll of packing tape in one hand and a smug, resolved look in his eyes. "What the hell is going on?" I asked, voice sharp and cracked from sleep. He barely blinked. "We're here to help with the move." My mother appeared behind him, smiling like she'd just solved a Rubik's Cube. "We've made everything as easy as possible, sweetheart. The truck is here. We've already paid the first 2 months on a nice little studio just 15 minutes from the office. It's fully furnished, perfect for someone like you who's always working anyway. No distractions." Behind them, Drew was opening my garage like it belonged to him. Belinda was standing in my front yard with her hands on her belly, smiling like the queen of a kingdom I apparently no longer ruled. "You're insane," I said, taking a step back, trying to block the doorway with my body. "This is my house. You can't just show up and decide I'm moving." Dad's face tightened, that familiar shift from fake cordiality to simmering control. "We didn't decide anything, Julia. This is what's best for everyone. You're being difficult for no reason." "No," I said louder this time. "You're trying to evict me from my own home because Belinda can't manage her life and you're too spineless to say no to her." My mother gasped, as if I'd just slapped her. "How dare you speak like that about your sister? She's pregnant, Julia. She needs support. She needs space." "Then you move," I shot back. "Open your doors. Turn your living room into a nursery. But you don't get to shove me out of the one thing I built on my own." Dad stepped forward, towering over me with that hard, quiet stare he'd perfected over years of disapproval. "Enough. We've done this your way. We've listened to your little outbursts and waited for you to come to your senses. But this isn't about you anymore. You've had your time. Now it's Belinda's turn." That sentence landed like a punch to the throat. I looked past him, at Belinda now stepping onto the porch, holding a cup of my coffee from the kitchen like she owned the place. Drew already moving boxes without asking what they even held, my things, my life, my home. Something in me snapped, not in an explosive, screaming kind of way, but in that bone-deep clarity that comes when you realize just how little you mean to the people who should have protected you. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I reached for my phone, dialed the non-emergency number I already had saved, and calmly said, "I need to report an attempted trespassing at my residence. They're trying to forcibly remove me from my home. I'm the legal owner. I need help." My father's eyes narrowed. My mother's mouth dropped open. Belinda froze mid-sip. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the background character in someone else's story. I felt like the only one who had the right to speak. Because this house wasn't a gift they gave me. It was a boundary I drew, and I was done letting them walk over it like a welcome mat. I don't even remember when I started yelling. One second I was standing there, frozen in the doorway watching Drew carry my printer down the front steps like it was just another task on his to-do list, and the next I was screaming so loudly my throat burned. Put it down. All of you. Put everything down right now. They paused, barely. Like I was some child throwing a tantrum, and they were the adults who knew better. That smug, tired, condescending glance between them, the kind that said, "We expected this, just let her get it out of her system," was what sent me over the edge. "You don't get to pack my things," I shouted, my voice echoing off the hallway walls. "You don't get to walk into my house, into my life, and treat me like I'm just some placeholder you can evict whenever Belinda decides she's ready to play mom in a house she didn't earn." Belinda looked stunned for a second, her eyes wide, coffee still in hand. But then, as always, she defaulted to the role she knew best, victim. "You don't have to be cruel, Julia," she said, her voice all wounded innocence. "I thought you loved me." "Loved you?" I nearly laughed. "You've never made space for anyone but yourself. My job, my house, my life. You trample over it all like it's just filler until your real moment arrives. You didn't even ask, Belinda. You just showed up and started making plans." My mother stepped in then, tone clipped and cold. "Julia, you're being hysterical. This is why we didn't try to talk through this again. You never listen." "Oh, I don't listen?" I turned on her, every buried memory rushing up like bile. "I've been listening for 34 years. Every time you praised Belinda for something I did first. Every time you rolled your eyes when I talked about work, but cried over her unfinished art projects and half-baked business ideas. Every damn time you told me to be the bigger person while she ran wild and you made excuses." My dad crossed his arms, trying to play the calm, reasoned patriarch, but his voice was hard. "We're just trying to help you see the bigger picture." "No, you're trying to erase me," I said, and I felt the fury boiling through every word. "You've been trying since I was old enough to speak. When I won that spelling bee in 3rd grade and you told me not to brag because Belinda was going through a sensitive phase. When I got my first job and you didn't even ask where it was because she'd just dyed her hair blue and decided she wanted to move to California. When I bought this house and you said, 'That's nice, but Belinda might need support soon.' Everything I do is ignored, downplayed, or used as a stepping stone for her next collapse." Belinda's voice cracked then. "That's not fair. You've always hated me." "No," I said, and for once my voice dropped to something quieter, colder. "I resented you. For always taking. For never having to earn anything. For standing there with your open hands and letting everyone else fill them while I was taught that needing help was weakness. You were the golden child, Belinda, and I was the emergency exit." My mom looked like she might cry, but I was too far past the point of caring. "You call me selfish because I won't give you my home. But where were any of you when I was building this? Where were you when I was scraping by on side gigs, working 60 hours a week so I could qualify for a loan? Where were you when I came home to an empty house and celebrated getting promoted by eating leftovers alone?" They didn't answer. Not a word. Just silence and stiff faces, and that awful feeling of being looked at like a stranger in the middle of my own living room. I looked at all of them then. Drew still holding the box like he wasn't sure what to do, Belinda blinking like she was trying to force out tears, my parents frozen in their stubborn, selective concern, and I realized nothing I said would ever be enough. Not because it wasn't true, but because they were never listening in the first place. So I screamed it, one last time, as loud and raw and furious as I'd ever felt. "Get out of my house." I stood in the center of my living room, heart pounding, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the phone. My belongings were being shuffled around like yard sale leftovers, half-packed boxes stacked by the door, drawers open, my office chair already missing. I'd shouted myself raw, and nothing changed. My parents refused to meet my eyes. Belinda kept whispering to Drew like they were planning furniture placement, like I was just the angry roommate they needed to wait out. They weren't listening. They never had. And somewhere between watching my dad unplug my monitor and my mom folding my clothes into a box like she was doing me a favor, something inside me clicked. I couldn't talk them out of this. I couldn't logic or beg or yell my way back into control. So I did the only thing left. I called the police. The moment the dispatcher answered, my voice steadied. I gave my name, address, and told them plainly that my family had entered my home without permission, that they were removing my property, and that I was the legal homeowner requesting assistance. The operator's voice was calm, professional, and hearing someone take me seriously for the first time all day almost made me cry. They arrived 12 minutes later, 2 officers in full uniform, 1 male, 1 female. When they knocked, I opened the door wide and let them see everything. The chaos, the people, the half-packed boxes. The tension in the room shifted immediately. My dad straightened up like he was the one who called them. My mom stepped forward, wiping her eyes like she was about to deliver a performance. Belinda froze mid-sentence, her hand resting on my kitchen counter like it belonged to her. "Officers," I said, my voice level. "These people are in my house without permission. They're trying to force me out and take my belongings. I need them removed." That was the first time my mother actually looked afraid. The officers asked for ID, and I handed them my license and the deed copy I kept in a drawer near the front door, something I'd printed after the last time Belinda hinted that technically it was a family home. My dad scoffed as the officer reviewed it, like this was all some overreaction I'd cooked up out of spite. But when the officer turned and asked my family to provide proof of residence or ownership, the air changed completely. My father stiffened. "This is our daughter's home," he said through clenched teeth. "We're just trying to help her make a better choice." The female officer didn't flinch. "That's not how the law works, sir. If she owns this property and you're here without consent, you need to leave." That's when my mother started crying, loud, theatrical sobs that made my skin crawl. "Julia, please," she gasped between sniffles, "don't do this. We're your family." Belinda's voice came sharp behind her. "You're seriously calling the police on your pregnant sister? Do you have any idea how cruel that is?" I turned to face her, eyes burning. "Do you have any idea what it's like to be erased in your own life? To watch your family treat your home like a temporary storage unit for someone else's chaos? You don't get to cry now. Not after you tried to steal the one place I feel safe." The male officer stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said to Belinda, "you need to return anything you've moved and prepare to leave. Now." Drew looked ready to argue until he caught the look in the officer's eyes. Silently, bitterly, they began unpacking. My dad glared at me the entire time, jaw clenched, eyes full of rage. He didn't say a word until they were nearly out the door. "You think this makes you strong?" he said, low and cold. "All you've done is burn the bridge. Don't expect any help from us ever again." I stared at him, my hands shaking but my voice steady. "I never got help from you to begin with." And just like that, they were gone, walking to their cars in silence. The truck still half-loaded, my belongings piled on the front lawn like evidence of a failed coup. When the officers left, I sat down on my couch, alone again, but not empty. The house was still mine. Every room, every inch. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't apologizing for protecting it. By the time I woke up the next morning, the damage was already done. My phone was vibrating nonstop, texts, missed calls, notifications piling up like floodwater. The first message I saw was from a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "Just saw Belinda's post. I can't believe you'd do that to her." I stared at it for a second, still groggy, before unlocking my phone and opening social media. It was all over my feed. Belinda had posted a carefully curated photo of herself on my front porch, cradling her stomach, eyes red like she'd just been crying, with some warm filter slapped over the whole thing to give it that washed-out, emotional tone. The caption was worse than I could have imagined. "Sometimes the people you count on the most turn out to be the ones who hurt you the deepest," it began. "Yesterday, my family tried to help me through the most vulnerable time of my life, only to be met with screaming, rejection, and police sirens. I never thought I'd be treated like an intruder by someone who's supposed to love me. I just wanted a safe space for my child, and instead I was made to feel like trash on the curb. I'm heartbroken. Please be kind to those who are struggling. You never know the battles they're fighting." It had been up for less than 12 hours and already had hundreds of comments, most of them furious on her behalf. People I didn't know, people she barely knew, piling in with, "You're so strong, Mama," and "I can't believe your own sister would do that," and "Shame on her. She'll regret this one day." And Belinda, of course, replying to the ones that painted me as the villain, thanking them for their compassion during such a difficult time. I couldn't breathe. Every detail was distorted. She never mentioned barging in without permission, never said they tried to forcibly remove me from my own home, never told anyone she had a crib delivered to my doorstep like she'd already claimed the nursery. In her version, she was a homeless, heartbroken, pregnant woman just looking for shelter, and I was the monster who slammed the door in her face and called the police. Within hours, it had spilled beyond just family. More relatives began chiming in, some privately messaging me to explain myself, others publicly commenting on her post, dropping comments like, "I always knew Julia was cold, and Belinda was always the warm one." The story spread fast. So fast, in fact, that by 11:30 that morning, I got a call from HR. Not a check-in, not a gentle concern, a full-on inquiry. "Julia, we received a few anonymous calls this morning regarding a personal incident that occurred at your residence yesterday," the rep said, voice professional and careful. Some of them mentioned inappropriate conduct, potential mental health concerns, and allegations of harassment. I felt the blood drain from my face. "You're kidding." "I wish I were," she said. "We're not taking any action, but leadership has been made aware." For your own sake, it might be best to keep a low profile until things cool down. I hung up and sat at my desk, numb, staring at the framed photo of me with my project team. The one Belinda once joked made me look corporate and joyless. My hands were shaking. I'd spent years building a reputation as calm, competent, reliable, and now I was being painted as unstable, dangerous, cruel, all because I refused to hand over my life like a spare sweater. I shut off my phone, logged out of every app, and sat in the silence of my home, the home I defended, the life I defended, and realized just how far people would go to protect a lie if it kept their fantasy intact. Belinda had weaponized sympathy, played the only card she ever had, and it was working, because people will always believe the tears they can see, not the scars they can't. The week after the incident felt like swimming through wet concrete. Every step was heavy, every breath tight in my chest. The house was quiet again, but not peaceful, just hollow, like it had been scrubbed clean of something toxic, but still carried the lingering scent. I didn't sleep much, didn't eat much, didn't speak unless absolutely necessary. The shame clung to me, not because I regretted what I'd done, but because I knew how many people had been fed a lie about who I was, and believed it. So I started with what I could control. I changed the locks the same day I met with a lawyer. She walked me through the legal protections I hadn't known I had, helped me draft a cease and desist letter, and coached me on what to say if anyone from my family showed up again. She didn't flinch when I told her the whole story, just nodded and said, "Good. You're doing exactly what you need to do." Then I found a therapist. A real one, not a self-help blog or a friend's shoulder, but someone trained to unravel damage buried so deep you forget it was ever inflicted. Her name was Nina. She didn't tell me to forgive. She didn't tell me to move on. She told me to grieve, to let myself mourn the family I never really had. That hit harder than I expected, because deep down, I'd always hoped if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, succeeded enough, they'd notice. They'd care. But the truth was simpler. Some people only love you when you make their lives easier. I stopped calling, stopped responding. I let the silence grow roots. At work, things settled. My manager pulled me aside a week later and said, "Don't worry about the noise. You've more than proven yourself here." And for once, I believed it. Not because I needed their validation, but because I'd earned it. Life didn't snap into place. There was no grand turnaround, no cinematic redemption arc. Just slow, patient rebuilding. I joined a local book club, made small talk at the gym, said yes to dinner invitations I used to dodge. One night, at a friend's game night, I met someone. His name was Alex, and he didn't ask me to smile more or explain why I wasn't close with my family. He listened. He showed up. He let me be angry without flinching. We didn't fall in love in a whirlwind. It was steady, grounded, the kind of affection that doesn't demand performance. He met my friends before he met my body. He laughed at my worst jokes and asked me real questions and never once called me intense. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was being tolerated. I felt wanted, respected, safe. Over time, I stopped using the word family to describe people who weaponized love. I started using it for my people, the ones who showed up with soup when I was sick, who sat through my venting without checking their phones, who remembered my promotion when no one else did. My chosen family. There's a new rug in the guest room now. The walls are painted a warmer shade of gray. The crib is long gone, donated anonymously. That room is mine again, not because I sleep in it, but because I took it back. I still go to therapy. I still have days when the old narratives whisper in my ear. But I answer them now. I remind them that I stayed, that I stood up, that I chose myself.